On the left here, you can see my 386 that I've been slowly building over the course of this year. And on the right, what you see there is a brand new old stock computer case that I'm planning on transplanting all the innards from that 386 into. It's something I've been on the lookout for a while. I'm not huge fan of the look of the case that it's in at the moment. It doesn't really look like what I consider a 386, and as you can see, it's a little bit mismatched, and I don't really like that big silly power button either. So I've considered myself fairly lucky finding this new old stock case. You don't really get big cases like this that are that old as new old stock very often, so I snapped it up while I could, and it looks exactly the part. This is, you know, if you'd asked me to describe exactly what a 386 looks like to me, this is it. So let's start by having a look at the case as it looked when it arrived. As you can see, it was even still in the original box. Have a look at this logo here, DTK Computer. Doesn't that just look like they hadn't changed their logo since the 1960s? It looks amazing. And opening up the box, you see it's even got the polystyrene. It's still wrapped in plastic. This is about as new old stock as you can get. Now, according to the person who I got this from, this case is from 1999, which to me, it doesn't look like a case from 99. I mean, that's in the days of Windows 98 and ATX computers. It seems like a little bit of a throwback for that. Not to say that that's not true, but my guess would be perhaps he bought it already as new old stock, or it's just the last of a line of computers that they were still just manufacturing at the time. But opening up the case and having a look inside, on the power supply we actually see a date of 1994, so that makes a little bit more sense. It still looks to me a little bit older than that, but certainly it definitely fits the 386 style that I was looking for. So with that out of the way, let's have a little bit of a tour of my 386 as it stands. First thing I'll really want to point out is this Adlib mouse mat, completely bespoke. Had it ordered at way too high a price, but I don't care because it's awesome. Next is a keyboard you might have recognized if you'd seen my earlier keyboard video. This is the original keyboard that came with my original 386 back in when I was a kid. And here's the mouse I have been using so far, an old Genius mouse. I like the look of it, but again, it's not so much what I consider to look the part for a 386. This would really suit a 286 or an XT machine better. And here we have that black drive bay cover. This is an interesting one. So I actually had a friend at work 3D print me an appropriate one. I could not find one that fit. Thanks, Gary, for making that for me. So let's just move a couple of these peripherals over just to see what the new one's going to look like. The monitor is one last thing that I still want to change. This is the original monitor from my Pentium 2 machine. So let's open up the old one and have a little bit of a look inside, and you'll see what kind of a build this is. And starting with the graphics card. This is a Tseng Labs ET4000AX card. And if you do know anything about graphics cards of the era, you'll probably know that Tseng Labs were very highly regarded, so that's why I snapped this one up a while ago. And next we have the controller card. Nothing exciting here, just your standard serial and parallel port and your floppy and hard drive controller. But moving on, we've got one card that I'm, again, very proud of. It's an Adlib card, but the observant among you will notice it's not an original Adlib card. I'm not made of that kind of money. No, this is a clone, and the reason I'm particularly proud of this one is it's one of these kits that you can get to solder together yourself, and it's actually the first thing I've ever, major thing I've ever really soldered together, and it even worked first time, which I was amazed by. And moving on, we have my quote-unquote hard drive. I do have a vintage hard drive as well that belongs in this machine, but as you can see, this here is a CF card adapter. Long story with this, all sorts of problems getting this to work right, because I needed adapters, and then I needed adapters for the adapters. Eventually I got it working. I do keep this proper vintage hard drive in the case just for the nostalgic whirring sound it gives me, but unfortunately, like so many of these old hard drives, it's dying a slow death, so I don't actually use it in any other capacity than that. And here's the little CMOS battery rig that I've put together to save me having to have one of those horrible leaky onboard batteries that came with these things. Luckily, the motherboard that I have had them snipped off well before any damage was done. And speaking of the motherboard, let's take that out and have a bit of a look at it. So the idea with this build, I was trying to create a computer similar to, but not exactly like the computer that I had as a kid. I've upgraded the RAM from what I think was probably 4 megabytes back in the day. I've put 8 megabytes in this one. Here we see the processor chip. It's not socketed, it's soldered right onto the board there. I had a 33 megahertz. This is a 33 megahertz, and I'm fine with that. So here we just see all the parts assembled before I go and pop them back in the new case. Start by taking the bezel off the front of the case here. It's also quite a nicely thought out and designed case. All the little drive bays and hard drive holders slide out and click in. We'll start by putting the motherboard in and wiring up the LEDs and things. I noticed, unfortunately, they're not labeled on this, so I just have to have a bit of a look, see where they hook up to, and I've made a few little labels that I can stick on there for future reference. And so now we can hook those all up to the motherboard. Not everything has an appropriate spot to hook onto the motherboard, but I'll just have to live with that. Now we can pop the 3.5-inch floppy drive in, and then I'll attach the power cables. We'll pop the CF card reader in there, and here comes the 5.25-inch floppy drive. And so we can start populating the motherboard with some cards, starting with the graphics card. And for our mouse upgrade, I have this bus card that came with my copy of Windows 3.0 for attaching a bus mouse. So we'll pop that in, followed by the controller card and the CMOS battery. Now I'll just screw that old hard drive into the hard drive holder so we can pop that in the case and get that nice old whirring hard drive sound. Wire up all the drives. Wait, I need that bezel off again so I can slide the drives around again and attach the data cables. And now let's hook up the keyboard. Because everything's in place, we can see if this thing works. And with a bit of editing trickery, it does. Naturally, it didn't actually work first time. Some of the cables were the wrong way around and that sort of thing. But with a bit of editing, we have it working straight away. And since the BIOS battery had been off the motherboard for a little while, all the settings had reset. So let's just go put them back in. And with the case all put back together, let's give this thing a nice proper test run by playing a bit of Wolfenstein 3D.